today we have a very special guest, and I am extremely excited to introduce to you. I would like to introduce to you my friend, Kathi Seal is with us today. So would you please give her a round of applause? Yes. Good morning. Welcome, Kathi. I saw you speak at an opening night for Celebrate Recovery at Restoration Church.
That's right.
And that's where I first remember seeing you.
Yep.
And then Kurt and Tracy, who run our Celebrate Recovery ministry here at the Net, invited you to come to give your testimony.
Yep.
And it is outstanding.
Thank you.
And it is beautiful.
Thank you.
And I was so struck when I first saw Kathi and her testimony, just full of the life and grace and love and mercy of Jesus Christ. And she is just beautiful inside and out. And so I wanted to invite her this week to share her testimony and her story. So I love it. And we met probably about 2 weeks ago. We sat down and had lunch together.
Yes.
And so with that being said, one of the things that she sat down and told me immediately, she's like, I did not meet the Lord until I was like 35 years old.
Right. That's true. That's true.
That is true. And so why don't we start and back up a little bit and just tell me, you're from Huntsville, right?
Born and raised.
Born and raised here from Huntsville. That's good. It's, you don't really find that all the time. There's so many people from everywhere. So what an honor to be born and raised in Huntsville.
That's me.
And so tell me what it was like for you as a kid growing up.
Growing up was great. I have an older sister and a mom and dad, and my mom stayed home and my dad worked, and my sister and I went to school and came home, did homework. We had a good life growing up. Didn't really want for anything. We were provided everything that we needed, and I just remember having a good life up until about 10 years old.
About 10 years old.
Yeah.
And so stay-at-home mom.
Yep.
Just probably average family.
Average family, yeah.
Well, what happened at 10 years old?
When I was 10, my parents, they went through a very nasty, ugly divorce. I don't really remember much of the details. I do remember one night my mom coming in to me telling me that, she and my dad are getting divorced and that it wasn't our, mine or my sister's fault. I do remember that, but that's really about all I remember, other than it was ugly and it was nasty. And my parents, did not get along at all after that point. So
how did that affect your mom? I mean, what did you see different?
My mom became a completely different person. The mom that I knew, that baked cookies after school, she was gone. She just went into what I now know as depression. She would stay in her room, not open the blinds, all the lights out. It was just, she was completely different.
How did that affect you, though, being 10, 11 years old? You go from a mom every afternoon at home and seeming what felt like a normal family life to that much of a transition.
I think that's where I really began to kind of lose, what a family was. I think that's where I really started getting confused about what happened, because I didn't know depression, at 10 years old, what 10-year-old does know depression. So I was just confused, I think, really confused about what was going on.
And with the divorce, what did you have to do, though? I thought this was very interesting when we were talking. At such a young age, your parents go through a divorce, and what did you have to do after in making a decision? Tell us about that.
My sister and I were told that we had to write a letter to the judge to choose who we wanted to live with. And at that time, I think I was probably 11 or 12, because I first went through separation. And that was really hard, trying to choose what parent, what child ever wants to choose which parent, It was just a very hard decision to be placed on a 12-year-old.
What decision did you have to make, though? How did you have to choose?
I chose to live with my dad. And the reason being is, number one, my sister did, and she's older, so I always just kind of went with what she did. And another one was because my mom wasn't the mom that I knew. She was completely different. So that's why I chose my dad. And that was the beginning of my very awful decision making.
And so going from having both parents in the house, what was it like? How often did you see your mom? What kind of relationship did y'all have?
After that, it went from, seeing her every day to probably about an hour a week, maybe. Since she and my dad didn't get along, she wasn't allowed in our home, and she didn't have a home of her own. So she would come and visit, and we would have to go sit in her car with her and visit with her.
So that was really difficult. And then living with your dad, tell me about your relationship with your dad as middle school and high school.
That relationship was very surface level. It still is. He's a very non-emotional kind of person. Well, I think he is. He just doesn't show it. We would communicate by leaving notes on the dining room table. That's just how we communicated growing up. If I wanted to go somewhere, I just wrote a note, Dad, I'm here or going wherever, and that was it. I went where I wanted and did what I wanted, and he let me. It was just no boundaries, no rules. That's just how it was.
And then also being a middle schooler, you were not thinking, I wish I had boundaries and rules.
Yeah, no way.
I had those.
Brain, yeah.
Like you probably thought, woo! Yeah. And so with no boundaries and no rules, what did life begin to look like as you start moving through middle school?
Oh, yeah, that's when it started, a lot of experimenting, a lot of, like I said, from that decision making, from when I was 10 or 12 years old, that's when I had free reign to do whatever I wanted. So, of course, every decision I made was bad. It was just bad. What 14-year-old makes a good decision, without any parental guidance? It just wasn't good. It just was, yeah. That's when I started, experimenting with alcohol, marijuana, butane, anything really that would change the way I felt, I started experimenting with.
Well, I think that's really interesting because I know we have our students in here today, and I think personally that kids, no matter what the family situation is, all kids are curious.
Yeah.
All right.
They are.
And so with you having no boundaries and then some kids having boundaries, when you go to a place, a party or whatever, and I remember you mentioning this because I asked you, what do you think about marijuana? What do you think about pot and things like that? And I thought your response was really interesting because when you would go to parties and there was pot there and marijuana, I thought you had a good point about why you should stay away from those things. Tell us about that.
Pot is illegal, number one. It's just illegal, So if you're thinking about doing it or if you have done it, just stop. Just stop. Because wherever there is pot, there is going to be another drug. That's just how it is. And you might think that pot is nothing, that it's, it gives me a little head change or whatever. It's not that simple because you're going to a party, you're going to go buy your pot from this guy. Well, he's friends with another guy who has cocaine and ecstasy and, all these other drugs with him. So where there's pot, there's going to be another drug. That's just how it is. So just stay away. It's not worth it.
It's not. And so you were talking about making decisions. So sometimes probably in middle school and high school, and I know you just think that way when you're younger. You think, oh, well, this is not really going to affect me.
Right.
But you said about decision making. How did it affect your decisions as a teenager?
It doesn't change it does, it's hard to explain. It does change your thought process. Okay, so it's kind of like alcohol for the adults who have drank alcohol. You know, your decision making on alcohol is not the same as it would be if you're sober. It's just different. So if you make a decision when you're high on pot, it's not going to be the same kind of decision you would make as if you were sober without anything affecting your mind. So it's just not worth it.
It's not. And so if you could go back and talk to Kathi when you were a teenager,
Oh, wow.
what would you say to her?
Wow. Oh, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time for that. I would say so many things. Yeah, just don't do it. Just don't even try it.
Don't even open the door.
Don't even open the door. You never know how addicted you will become. If it's in your gene, like it's in mine and my family's, you'll never know. Just don't try it.
Because you said something to me over lunch that I thought was really, really interesting. You said, I never chose addiction.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't want addiction for myself. But that's what it ended up. So, yeah.
Well, going through middle school and high school, experimenting on the weekends, and you just kind of open the door, setting the stage for maybe more to come.
Right.
But something really great happened, though, when you were a senior in high school. What happened between you and your mom?
My mom and I reconnected, actually, when I was about 16, 17. Thank you.
Welcome.
About 16 or 17.
Here, I got another one. Hold on to that one. It's the only one I got.
We reconnected, and it was really great. You know, from that point up until my late 20s, she and I we just became mom and daughter again, you know, and it was just really special. It was really great.
Well, one of the things that you said about your mom is that trying to work through feeling like you were abandoned by her, and I thought it was very honest that you said you were.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
you got to know your mother as a senior and on up into adulthood, and as a woman.
Yes.
Not just a mom, because we look at our parents like, wow, they're our parents and they know everything. And, all right, but then you got to see your mother as just a true human woman and the things that she went through. And how did that make you feel toward her, or how did that shift your relationship with her?
It made me feel like, you know, she's human, she's flawed, you know, just like I am, and so for her, you know, I guess it was at that point where I really realized, you know, she didn't intentionally abandon me. You know, she was going through her own stuff, but at the same time, I don't feel like she did what she could have done, you know, to be there for me as a teenager. But, you know, so there's. Yeah.
But I loved that, Kathi, because that's very honest. Like, you could look at your mom and say, you could see her now and appreciate the fact that she had gotten better. She had gotten a job, gotten a house.
Right.
Your relationship was better. But even as as a mom, you still say, you know, she could have done these things and held some form of responsibility.
Yes.
And then there was some forgiveness in that.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
There was.
Yes, there was.
So for years, y'all connected and had a really close relationship. And what a special God-given gift that was, right?
Yes.
Because what happened on February 13th of 2007?
February 13th of 2007, I was 29 at the time, and my mom was 55. I got a phone call from my sister, actually, telling me to go to my mom's work because my mom wasn't feeling good. So I went there, and it was just chaos from that moment until I learned from the doctor that she passed away in surgery. She had a heart attack, and she made it to the hospital, and she died during surgery. So, yeah.
That would be hard for anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just hard.
Yeah.
How did you deal with it? What happened in your whole mind and heart, and how did you personally deal? Because we all deal with grief in different ways.
Right.
But how did you deal with that?
That's when life just really went downhill for me. I didn't know how to deal with it, number one. Those first 3 years, I just isolated and I drank a lot of alcohol. And it was just bad. It was just really bad. Of course, I blamed this being called God that I didn't know. I blamed him, just whenever I was reconnecting with my mom and getting that really, woman-to-woman relationship. How could he do this? I really resented this being that I didn't believe in. And then it got really bad. That's when things really just took a turn for the worse.
So 3 years of just isolation, survival, angry, mad at God.
Yep.
And then what did the next 3 years look like?
The next 3 years were really bad. They were really dark. I was introduced to crystal meth, and things just went downhill really fast. At first, I would just smoke it, maybe snort it, and then it got to the point where I was injecting it. And if you know anything about any drug that you inject, it's just that quick that you're addicted, regardless of if you have an addiction gene or not. It's just very quick. It's very ugly. It was awful. It was not only to me, but to my family, to the people that loved me. I was just torturing them as much as I was torturing myself. It was very bad.
I think that is so hard, because I think any type of addiction or anything like that, it's just not about the person who's addicted.
Right.
It is a whole family issue. And how did that affect your sister? How did it affect your dad?
Oh, my sister, she tried to believe that it wasn't drugs. She didn't believe it for the longest. She really, this is how bad off it was. She believed it was a mental issue, that I had a mental disorder. And I wanted her to believe that, because I didn't want her to know that I was an addict. I didn't want anybody to know that I was an addict, especially to injecting crystal meth. So it was, she really dealt with it, like most people probably would, put a blind eye up to it. You don't want to believe that your loved one is addicted. You just don't. But it's the truth. It happens. And that drug makes you that psychotic. It really does. And, you're staying up for days and hours, and it really messes with your mind, your brain. So I had her fooled, and finally when the truth came out, we'll get to that in a minute. My dad, though, he completely cut ties with me. He knew that something wasn't right, and he cut ties.
I think sometimes you just do. You don't know what else to do. You don't know how to help.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just can't.
Yep.
And cutting ties, I would just think, would be really difficult.
It was the best thing.
I
look back now.
Why was it the best thing? Why was it the best thing for your dad to cut ties?
Because if not, he was just enabling me. That's it. Just completely enabling. I look back and think about, how did I survive? How did I function? How did I eat? I called my sister, who enabled me, who gave me food, who gave me, gas money, cigarette money. She gave me these things. Did I use it for that? No. It was on drugs. So cut ties. Or otherwise, you're completely enabling. That's it.
I can tell you my disposition and personality, I would completely be an enabler, 100%. I can tell you I would.
Most people are.
I know,
I would.
Loved
one. That's your, yeah.
I know. It's when it's your child or your loved one. So July the 11th, 2013 was a
big
day.
life changer for me.
What
Huge
happened?
life changer for me, for the better. Of course, at the time, I thought it was awful. I was arrested. For the last time. That was my 5th time being arrested in like a 3-year period. And so I was arrested and taken to Madison County Jail.
But what did you think was going to happen?
I thought I was going to call my sister and she was going to bawl me out like she did the previous 4 times. That's what I thought was going to happen.
Did she?
Nope. Not this time. This time I had to serve 65 days, in the county jail. And that is whenever I met Jesus, whenever I was in jail.
So when we were having lunch together, I'll just tell you, I know nothing about jail. I've never been there. So I was like, how's the food? And Kathi said, it's awful. And I was like, do they give you a pillow? And she's like, no, you have a thin mat with like this wool blanket on there, and you get to shave your legs like once a week. And she's like, it's just terrible. It's terrible.
Awful.
And so, I don't know, I was just curious. And y'all are not laughing, but anyway,
so
I wanted to know some stuff. So I asked her.
Funny.
But something really interesting happened with your cellmate.
Yes. So the girl next to me would pull out her book every night and read. And finally one night, I'm like, what are you reading? And she's like, the Bible. And she sits up. She's like, you've never read the Bible? And I'm like, no, I don't want to read the Bible. And she's like, oh my goodness, let me read to you. And she read to me about Abraham and Sarah. And from that point, I was just, like, my jaw, I don't know.
Abraham and Sarah,
I don't know. I just couldn't believe that there was this much history in it and that it was from what I'd heard, the truth, And so I wanted to know more. Mm-hmm. And so, like, the next morning, you get to order a free Bible in jail. It's the only thing you really get. So I ordered my free Bible, and I spent those 65 days, the rest of those 65 days, just diving in the Word. I'd never read it before. I didn't know there were 4 Gospels. I didn't know that, I didn't know that they were all the same book. I just didn't know. There was so much I didn't know. But it's really, really funny not funny, just a God thing. The first book that I read, I'm like, okay, I don't even know how to pray, but where do you want me to start, God? And so I just opened the book, how like most people do what really happened for me. I opened it to 1 Samuel. And of course, if you know anything about that, it's about, slaying your giant, and so it was just really cool how it kind of worked out.
And so just not ever knowing anything, it was you, God, and the Scriptures.
Yeah.
And He would just reveal Himself to you.
Yes.
And then you also talked about a couple of other cellmates. Y'all would get together and talk about God.
Yep. The one girl that was in there, she would have church in her cellmate, or in her cell. We'll just call her Amy because she kind of shows up later, a little bit later in my testimony. She would have church. So we would all go into her cell and she would preach the word, So I kind of got to know a little bit about Jesus through her, which was really interesting. Yeah.
So your 65 days are up.
Yep.
You're out.
Yep.
And I did not ask you this, so I don't know. But after you leave jail, how did you celebrate recovery? Like, how did you get even connected to church?
I went to rehab first for 21 days, very short time, but it was really very short time. I knew I wanted to go to church. I just wasn't sure where or what to do. I just started going. My family and I, we just kind of started church hopping. I say my family and I, my sister, my cousins, my niece, we would go together. And finally, I ended up going to the Rock, and that's where I heard about their Celebrate Recovery. So I just went one night.
What did it feel like?
Awkward.
I was going to say, what did it feel like?
It is. It's very awkward, especially being single and not having. You just have to go. You just have to get uncomfortable and
I
go.
love that.
Yeah, you just have to get uncomfortable and go.
And so when you began to get involved in Celebrate Recovery, do you feel like God kind of opened your eyes more? And what steps did you take? Like, how did Celebrate Recovery honestly help you?
Wow. Man, in so many ways. That first year of recovery was really tough. That was, Celebrate Recovery did a lot for me then, but it was mostly me getting on my knees every single day and just fully surrendering to God. The steps do work if you work them. After that first year, though, it was really giving back, trying to help others make the right decisions, and trying to help them stay away from making the bad choices that you've already made. Of course, we all know that doesn't work sometimes. People are going to make their own decisions, but that's step one. Step one is just the foundation, and to me, that's the most important, in my opinion.
Well, I agree, and I actually brought a step study book, so you're probably wondering, like, what is step study? And this is what I think is so amazing about Celebrate Recovery, because every week you have the large group, and I know you've done this, the hard work, okay, the hard, deep-hearted work of digging it out every single week is really what sets a person free and allows them to move forward. Otherwise, you can be off of drugs and your body can be clean, but your mind still plays out all the things that have happened unless you deal with them. And this is what I love, that this first step study, it opens like this. It says, "You've undoubtedly heard the expression, time heals all wounds." Unfortunately, it isn't true. As a pastor, I frequently talk with people who are still carrying hurts from their 30s, from 30 or 40 years ago. And the truth is, time often makes things worse. Wounds that are left untended fester and spread infection. And so time only extends the pain if the problem isn't dealt with.
That's very true.
When you went through the step studies, give me like one or two things that were really the giant you had to face.
I would say, all right, step 4 is very important. That's, the moral inventory. You have to really dig deep and write down everything bad that has happened in your life, and good. Don't forget the good. And you have to get it out all on paper. And so I would say the main thing that really I had to deal with was the abandonment of my mom, not just the first time, but her death also, because I felt abandoned again, but for good that last time. So I really had to dig deep for that and really work hard to move forward on that. And then I guess the second is probably, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you, and so just let me tell you, the step studies, in my opinion, not opinion, but the fact is, what separates Celebrate Recovery from other programs is that you do go through the 12 steps, but they are related to Scripture, and you also go through the Beatitudes, right?
Yep.
And so it is a way to really not only work the 12 steps, but also to understand what God says about you and who you are in Christ Jesus.
Yes.
All right. Recently, after going through 6 years of working hard with sobriety, what has recently happened in your life that you were not expecting?
So, I'll give you kind of a backstory a little bit on how this happened. I was engaged, and the guy and I were leading a Celebrate Recovery at our church, which was amazing. We get to help so many people. Well, needless to say, the relationship didn't work out. Which is something I'm dealing with right now, which I would have to say would be my second thing. So it didn't work out. We both there just wasn't enough room in the church for both of us there. And I know a lot of you see that little thing on Facebook. Well, if you quit going to church because of someone there, you're not going for the right reason. I'm sorry, I disagree. There just wasn't enough room in the church for me and him both. We just couldn't get along. And that happens, however, that's when I just stepped back. I just stopped going to the church and I stopped doing my Celebrate Recovery.
So you kind of pulled back and isolated again.
Pulled all the way back, completely isolated again. That was in January of this year. So here I am, celebrated my 6th year, 6 years of being clean and sober on July 11th of this year. And I just knew, though, my life was not getting brighter and brighter. It was getting darker and darker as each month went by. I knew I was kind of a ticking time bomb, but I just wasn't willing, I guess, to really do what I had to do to stop what was going to happen.
What happened?
And so about a month ago, it's probably been about 6 weeks ago, I relapsed. Went back straight to the same thing that I came off of.
But I want to say something, okay? Because planning this FaceTime series, Rob kept saying, hey, you need to get in touch with Kathi. You need to get in touch with Kathi. And if you don't know me, I can procrastinate beautifully. I'm a really professional at it. And so 2 weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago, right? Sunday morning, Rob was like, it was a week before our FaceTime series. Rob was like, have you contacted Kathi? I was like, no. So I woke up early Sunday morning, like at 5:30, went straight to my phone, messaged her because I don't have her number. And that morning, and I said, hey, it's Lynnae from Net. We'd love you to come be part of our FaceTime series. And that's all I said, and I thought, it's going to be forever before I hear from her. She walks through the door that Sunday morning, and I looked at her while I was talking to her. I said, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were going to respond that fast. And she was like, I didn't either. She said, we were just planning. We had 4 churches to choose from. We just planned
My
to
sister chose this
church.
church.
Okay, just randomly. She says, as I'm getting in the car to come to the Net, I see a message from you. And here I am. And I was like, woo. And I thought that was so beautiful because now, Kathi is being very transparent. And I told her, I would love for you to come. And she said, I just want you to know that I have relapsed.
Yeah.
And I said, in my opinion, that is the most beautiful part of being a part of the body of Christ. Because currently, when you are really struggling with something and it is really tough, we all do it. Yeah. We want to pull back, isolate, and certainly not show that part, right? But I just want to give Kathi just an applause for being so brave and so honest right in the middle of her walk with this particular disease. I think it is awesome that she can come and be a part of a loving body of Christ and be transparent. I think that's awesome. And I love you for that. That is a huge encouragement because I promise you, every one of us is walking through something. Yeah. And to be open and honest is brave. And I believe God blesses that a lot. Yeah. So what are you doing right now to currently walk through this particular time?
Okay, so the relationship with God, that's the number one, and it's not just a relationship, it's got to be daily. For me, anyway. And if you don't know anything about addiction, I will tell you, first and foremost, it is a disease. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody chooses to be this way. It is a disease, and it is something that the enemy will use time after time after time. 6 years, you guys, 6 years, of not picking up anything, not even alcohol, nothing, sober as sober can be for 6 years, and then to go straight back to the needle. That's a disease. Okay, so I'm sorry I got off the question.
No, that's good.
So what am I doing? My relationship with God, that's first and foremost. I've also been doing 90 meetings in 90 days. there are days where I don't want to go, and yes, it is secular, but it's something to help me get out what I need to get out. The denial part is a huge part of anything, any kind of issue that you have. If you're not willing to face it, to look at it straight on and admit it, then you're always going to keep being in the same spot. You're going to be stuck. You're never going to move forward. So to be able to get it out and be upfront and open and honest about it is in my opinion, the best thing to do, because that's the only way we can move forward. I don't want to live that way for the rest of my life. I don't. It's awful. It's an awful way to live. I'll do anything to not be there.
And staying connected.
Staying connected is a huge, yes.
And I don't think that Kathi could be any more connected today. Do you? I just think it is amazing that she is sharing her testimony. And I don't think that anybody struggling with anything, you said be truthful.
Yes.
Get out of denial.
Yes.
Stay connected.
Yes.
Work your steps.
Your program. Yes.
Work your steps.
Yes.
And often I hear Kurt and Tracy talk about that Celebrate Recovery is a life and death ministry.
It is. Absolutely, it's a life and death ministry. You know, I had an issue kind of going back to work. This is just an example. I had an issue going back to work because I was afraid of being judged. You know, when my coworkers found out about why I was out for a week. And I told my doctor, I work for a doctor, I told him what happened. I cried to him, you know, I don't want anyone to know because I don't want to be judged. You know, I'm not a junkie. He made sure, you know, that no one was everyone was caring when I came back to work. Sorry. Yeah, so this is definitely life and death, you guys. It's not something that I choose for myself, and I'm sure if you know someone who's in addiction, they don't choose it either. You can say that they choose it, but they don't.
Well, listen, I appreciate you today. Can you see why I love Kathi Seal so much? She is, I know, she is beautiful, beautiful. And I cannot thank you enough for honoring us today to come and sit with us and share your story. I can't think of anything that is stronger and anything that is more powerful. And I really appreciate it, Kathi. I appreciate you are an encouragement. You are a source of strength. And we so appreciate you being here today.